right, and we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with Elizabeth Stein. Before I officially kick off, I'm Avery. I'm head of programming and events for Female Founder Collective, the 10th House, the North, the Cabinet, you name it. I manage the programming for it. So I am very excited for today's conversation because one, because you all are excited. We had hundreds of people RSVP for today's conversation. We had hundreds of questions submitted for
Mhm.
today's guests. It's like in truly record numbers. So you'll see me calling out your names and calling out those who submitted questions ahead of time. But if you have questions in real time, please pop those in the chat. I'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. Um, in my introduction, I mentioned I'm the head of programming for Female Founder Collective in the 10th House. If you're new and you don't know what either of those things are, the 10th House is Female Founder Collective's private membership community. So if you're a female founder and you're building a brand, whether that be in tech or health or beauty, wellness, fashion, food, beverage, you name it, we have networking opportunities, resources, tools, and events for you. And new, starting here in a couple of weeks, we are introducing our Founders Operating Manual. So this is a 4-week deep dive into the foundations that help you create a long-term successful brand. So those will be by industry, so really specific speakers coming in to lead sessions for you, more workshop style, where you're leaving with homework and things to implement within your business. Um, and we're really excited for you to get access to that. I dropped a link in the chat for you to add your name to the wait list. So you can learn more about that. But I've said excited so many times I need a new word for it, but I really am honored to have today's guest here with us today, Elizabeth Stein. She's the founder and CEO of Purely Elizabeth. Um, Hopefully everyone here eats breakfast. And if you do, I'm sure you know what today's brand is. You probably have millions of bags in your cabinet, just like I do. But they are the leading natural food brand known for award-winning granola, oatmeal, and bars. Elizabeth launched the company in 2009 after a career in PR and later becoming a certified holistic nutritionist. What began as a side hustle quickly evolved into a national brand now sold in retailers like Whole Foods, Target, Kroger, Walmart, and Costco, which is beyond impressive. And we'll be getting into how she's made that happen. Under her leadership, Purely Elizabeth has grown into one of the most recognized brands in the better for you breakfast category and snack category. Elizabeth, welcome. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Okay. I want to dive right in. And as you all know, if this isn't your first FFC event, you know we're all about the action. So we're digging in deep today. I wanted to start out because in your story, you learn that the brand started as a side hustle. Can you tell us a little bit about what that meant? Did you start it while you had a full-time job? What did the initial landscape of the brand look like?
Yeah, so I did start it while I had a job. I at the time had gone back to school to study holistic nutrition at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and I was working in the handbag industry doing sales and marketing. So I was actually, I guess technically this was like my third side hustle. At the time, I did not have a business plan to start Purely Elizabeth. I was really just trying to grow my nutrition practice. And I ended up going to a local triathlon to try to get clients and promote my practice. And it was really there that I got the aha moment. I brought a batch of blueberry muffins to entice people to come and chat with me. Nobody cared about the health counseling. Again, this is 2008, so it wasn't like the sexiest thing to talk about holistic health counseling then. And instead, everybody wanted to know where they could buy these delicious muffins. And person after person said the same thing. And I really, listened to the consumer and pivoted and said, by the end of the day, my spiel to them was that when they signed up for my nutrition newsletter, I would let them know when the products would be available. And so I left that race having no idea how to start a CPG brand, thought, you know, how do I do this? And I really put it on the back burner for several months. And then several months later decided, okay, I will start this. This will be a side hustle. Um, and really thought this would just be something that I was selling to clients and friends and family and was just going to take my time and build it slowly. And it ended up a year later, I went back to the same race. And again, this was a side hustle, sold out at the race, and then a couple days later was contacted by Daily Candy, which at the time was like the resource for the coolest products, trends. It's sort of the equivalent of going TikTok viral today, and they featured us in their newsletter blast. And within 3 hours, I had $10,000 of orders. And that was really the start of this side hustle, quickly not becoming a side hustle. So it was so immediate that I had to just go all in. And I knew at that moment, I could feel it so strongly in my gut that this was not a flash in the pan, that this was really something that was going to be life changing and that there was a real business here. And so I went all in at that point. I stopped doing all the things on the side or my
Wow.
main job and really focused just on building this brand.
How did you I first of all, I love a couple of things that you mentioned, that you boots on the ground were at the triathlon, even though it wasn't the plan, you were building your email list. So smart. And then getting featured in Daily Candy, that's like you said, I mean, a dream come true. You said 10,000 orders to begin with. How did you how did you fulfill those? You were just you just had your home at this point, right?
Yes. So I did not have a commercial kitchen at that time because, again, I just thought this was going to be a side hustle. I didn't have enough packaging. I went to sleep the night before the race, manifesting what I thought was going to be 20 orders, and instead I had the 10,000. So it ended up taking about 3 weeks to fulfill the orders, and I was overnighting flowers from Bob's Red Mill to my mom's cul-de-sac suburb house on a tractor trailer with a pallet, and I quickly found a commercial kitchen in Philadelphia. I was living in New York at the time. And so it took about 3 weeks to fulfill the orders. And I was driving back and forth from New York to Philly, filling up my car with product, bringing it up my walk-up apartment on the Upper West Side and shipping it UPS out of my apartment. And so it was wild times to think about. Unfortunately, this was like pre-social media, so I don't even have pictures or videos of these moments. It would be such great content today, but of course that was not part of anything back then.
Yeah, you'll have to do documentary style reenactment,
Yeah.
just with that footage. So it sounds like then, your hero product was muffins then.
It was muffin mix and a pancake mix.
Okay, so this was an audience question from Shannon Jones, which is, you began with multiple products. When did you realize that granola was the hero product? Was there specific data or feedback that confirmed that, especially if you started with muffins and you said pancake mix? When did granola come to be, and how? Was there specific data that
Yeah,
was
so great question. There wasn't data. I was not looking at here is the granola category and here's the opportunity. It instead was I had gotten a sample of puffed quinoa, which is quinoa's
Mhm.
baby cousin. And at the time I thought this could be a really cool, innovative new ingredient to use. But because I was making mixes, this puffed ingredient really didn't seem like it would work in a mix. And so I thought to just try it out in a granola. I had never made granola before. In truthfulness, I was not a granola eater at the time that I said, oh, you should be a better for you granola. But I baked up this batch of granola, and my mom was in town visiting, and she was a huge granola connoisseur. She tasted the granola hot out of the oven, and she said, like, this is better than anything I've ever had. This should be your next product. And there was something that was just so convincing in her, admiration for what she was tasting that I decided to go for it. And so my co-packer at the time could also bake, so they were doing the dry mixes, but they had baking capabilities. And so the next time that I went up there, I tested out, bringing this recipe there and baked it up in their oven. And I decided to start with a granola. And it was just such a strong conviction that she had. Looking back, I didn't look at the category, I didn't look at the TAM, I didn't say, here is a white space opportunity, but I knew that it was better than anything else in the market at the time and was so unique. And I think quickly what I saw when we launched that is that I was doing so many demos and going to so many consumer events, whether it was a yoga festival or a gluten-free festival, putting the product in front of people and listening to the consumer. And so what I saw was that so many people were going to be eating granola in so many more occasions than they were baking. Especially living in New York, consumers would say, "Oh, this is delicious, but I hardly bake, or I bake once a month." And
Mm.
then you would sample granola and people were saying like, "I'm going to consume this a couple bags in a week." And so it became very clear that the granola was a much faster way to market and something that consumers had a lot more love and interest in.
I A couple of things stand out in that. It's one, you're meeting your customers where they are. So it sounds like you were doing a lot of events. And was that mainly just sampling and gifting, or are you selling at those events too?
It was both. It was both sampling and selling.
Okay. And then um as far as fulfilling orders goes in those initial days, was there a website that you were driving people to? Was this through email? How were you tracking those orders and fulfilling them in those initial days?
Yeah, so I had built a website in the initial days, and looking back, it's pretty interesting because D2C wasn't a term for food. Like you couldn't even buy Amazon on food at the time. And because of the PR that we got with Daily Candy, it had this I had this built-in online business and it had snowballed from a PR perspective. So all of a sudden I was getting contacted by Oprah magazine and Food and Wine magazine, and it was really interesting that consumers at this point were willing to spend money on buying a food product online, which obviously today is so normal, but it wasn't back then. But it was, we were doing something so unique that I think that's why people were willing to purchase online. But so I had built a website, and then I was fulfilling everything out of my apartment on the Upper West Side at that time.
It sounds like the 2 words that keep coming to mind when we're chatting is gut and gap. One, gut, your food is great and good for the body, but also you've trusted your gut a lot and you spotted a gap and you really took full advantage of those things, and it seems like those 2 things have really led you and taken you so far, which is really cool to see. Um, I want to get to manufacturing in just a moment, but you were bootstrapping before you raised capital, which a lot of the people in the room are bootstrapping as well. Can you talk about some of the smartest scrappy moves you made in the early days that helped you extend your runway before you brought on capital?
Yeah, I think, it was very important to me to be scrappy as long as I could in having as much control of the company. I knew that I heard so many horror stories about raising money and partners and just what that dynamic can look like. Certainly, there's amazing stories as well, but that certainly scared me at the beginning. And so I was very conscious of waiting as long as I could to take outside capital. And so from the beginning, one of the key things I guess was in hiring. And to this day, we are still like a very lean team. But I was very thoughtful about those initial hires. I think you can go two ways in the beginning. One way is hiring people who have a ton of experience, and the other is hiring people who don't have a lot of experience but are going to cost less. And so I went the route with my first initial hires of hiring two people who were straight out of college, who didn't have the experience but had what I felt was the hustle and the passion to be able to be on this ride with me and, do all of those, gritty things that you have to do in the beginning. And today they're still with me. And now one is my head of creative and one is my head of manufacturing. So they've certainly grown into becoming the experts. But that was certainly a way. And I couldn't afford both of them day one. So they were both part-time at the beginning, but they offered different skill sets, which I needed. And so that was sort of one of the ways in which I really tried to stretch those dollars early on.
Yeah, you really went for like Jack and Jills of all trades, people who, like you said, themselves were really scrappy and would get in the weeds. And I always find it interesting because every founder sort of has their own approach. Some hire leadership first and some hire, scrappy first. It just depends. I feel like especially in F&B, scrappy really goes a long way. Um,
Yeah.
I want to switch gears. This is an audience question from Allison Sizer, and that is, at what point did you explore manufacturing partners and how did you approach those conversations early on?
So for that first year, I used a commercial kitchen, the kitchen that was in Philadelphia while I was living in New York. So driving back and forth a couple days a week. And that was very wearing. And I knew that that was not the best use of my time. And so I really was looking for a manufacturer like week one. But at the time, it was really hard to find a manufacturer who was gluten free. At the time, gluten free was very novel. We were using almond flour, so it wasn't a total allergen. So it's really hard to find a manufacturer at the beginning who's also small enough. So it took us about a year, and by us, it was really just me and my mom helped a lot at the beginning. It took about a year to find a manufacturer, and eventually had about three that I ended up going to visit who were small enough to do a run of our size. And so just call them over the phone and approach them by, getting a lead from someone who I had met at a trade show and visited their facilities and really ultimately ended up with one that I think, was super helpful in teaching me a lot about manufacturing. I certainly didn't know anything. And so there was a lot of learning early on that they were helping us to learn about the industry.
And of those three, how do you recommend, if you were to give like one or two pieces of advice at founders early on, choose that first partner?
I think that some of it uh, is gut, coming back to gut, right? So it is a relationship just like any other partnership that you have. And so, one of them, I just didn't get that feeling after
Yeah.
meeting them. The other was certainly coming down to like pure logistics of what are your minimums? What are your costs? Like, do they fit into this bucket of what our needs are? And then the third, I guess, would be like where we're headed and can they um, grow with us and scale with us and what sort of controls do we have? And I felt like even though I didn't know very much about manufacturing in the beginning, I did want to have a lot of those controls and being able to be at the facility and at those runs. Like that was really important to me to feel like I was truly a partner in it. And that really helped me to, I think, pick between the three that I had looked at.
Were there any negotiations in those conversations, especially when it came to putting together contracts where, like, did you negotiate? I want to be able to visit the facility. Like, I want that to be a part of my package with you.
I
What were the
I would
negotiations?
Yeah, I would say that there wasn't. And I think that looking back, that is a good lesson that I didn't know anything. And to that point, I used um an attorney at the time who was not specific in food. And that's a really great lesson that I think finding an attorney, whether it's food or whatever industry, but who really knows the ins and outs, specifically on a manufacturing contract, is so different from one industry to another. And so what I thought was we were using this great law firm from New York, they would know all the things. But in retrospect, years later, when we left and went to another manufacturer, there was just so much more that they could have put in there if they had truly been the expert within food. So that would be my number one advice when starting and when finding a manufacturer is really getting that contract in place and working with someone who knows what to negotiate on.
Such great advice. Also in the chat, if you do, let's say you work with an attorney that you really love within F&B, drop their names in the chat. I love to see people share resources. Before we move on
I have a
to,
great recommendation I can share too.
yes, please. Um, Before we move on to fundraising, I see a question in the chat, and we talked a little bit about your hero products, but how did you avoid getting distracted by launching too many SKUs too soon?
I don't know that if that answer is that I did. I think I did get distracted over the years.
You
So
didn't.
I think it's really easy, and I'm totally guilty of it, of like loving innovation and loving coming out with new product and really wanting to be first to market. I think that so much of what we did over the years was being an innovator in the category. And looking back, like we came out with mushroom bars
Yeah,
in 20, I don't know, 16 maybe. It was like well ahead of the time, well ahead of mushrooms being an interesting trending ingredient, but it was definitely too early for us to get into the bar category. We hadn't even mastered granola. And so really it should be, once you've mastered that category, then expanding into other categories. So I think that would be a great lesson, is to use your discipline as much as possible to stay focused on the category that you're in. That being said, if I look back and say, well, we started as muffin and then got into granola, and had we never gotten into granola, I don't know that Purely Elizabeth would still be around. And so sometimes on the side, like if you feel so strongly that this product is going to catapult you into the next phase of the business, then you have to have permission to also go with that and
yeah.
maybe
It sounds
extend.
like too, and correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like the granola choice was really consumer driven. I know it was your mom specifically, but
Yeah.
really consumer driven. Like it was a product that she wanted, and as a granola lover, like her opinion held a lot of weight. Where maybe in the mushroom specific, it was more like innovation
Yeah.
led rather than consumer led. Maybe I'm just reading between the lines, but um, that could be a lesson here too. Okay, I see some of you dropping your lawyer Rex in the chat. I love that. Okay, so switching gears now to when to raise and how to prepare, and then we still have so much to get into. We only have 20 minutes together. Okay, so when you were bootstrapping, what milestones told you that it was time to bring on outside capital? And if you were to do it over again, would you raise earlier, later, or at the same time?
I would definitely not do it differently. I'm so grateful that I'm still the majority owner today. And so to be able to still be majority 16 years later is pretty amazing and rare. So I would not change that. Eventually, when I did decide, we were at the point that we really need money. I mean, I was having countless stressful days just watching every dollar coming in and every dollar coming out, and like, was that check from our distributor going to come in, and could I pay payroll? And that's not a fun way to be living. So when that had really started to come to fruition and get very stressful, and at the same time that the business was starting to scale more, it felt like I needed to bring in outside capital that was really going to be strategic and not just money. And so I really made the decision of bringing in a partner who could be helpful. They weren't just going to add dollars, but really be helpful. And they did end up really being helpful.
Yeah, they were acting as an advisor in addition to an investor.
Yeah, they were getting in the weeds. So our initial investor was actually um the group within General Mills. And
Yeah,
so they were really, helping us from market research and R&D, and just giving us resources that we never could have afforded on our own or had the knowledge to bring on that.
yeah. Um, and then we have another audience question is from Jacqueline Isaac. Who was your first critical hire? You talked a little bit about this, and how did you attract uh, competitive talent? And then this one, I want to combine this with one that just came through in the chat from Orly, and that is, if you had to do it all over again, would you hire or prioritize different roles in those first few years?
Yeah, so I would say I wouldn't have changed how I started, because I think, at the same time, I wasn't ready to hire really experienced people in that we were still trying to figure out pieces of the business. And so I would not change that early strategy. I think the first key person beyond my first two hires was actually an outside sales group. So rather than hiring an internal head of sales, which would have cost a lot of money at that time, I hired a broker manager, is sort of what their title was. So they really acted as our outsourced sales team, our outside sales force, but only worked with, say, 5 or 6 other brands. And so that was truly the first big hire where they then there were 2 people on the team who acted as that outside sales force, and they really taught me so much about the industry and about sales and how UNFI, our distributor, worked, how Whole Foods worked, how all of those key retailers worked. And so that was certainly, I think, a critical role to hire for early on, and one that I would definitely recommend.
And was that on purpose? So was that a bonus? So again, just putting together some themes here of the strategic investors, for example, you didn't want just someone to bring on capital, but you wanted someone who could open doors and advise on things. And then it seems like same with the sales uh, agency that you hired. It wasn't just getting a job done; they could open doors and advise on things that maybe your team didn't have access to. And
Yeah,
I can't
exactly.
yeah, and it seemed was that on purpose? Was that just like a bonus that sort of you realized afterward, or was that something you were specifically hiring when you were interviewing salespeople? That was a question you were asking.
I think it was actually one in which it sort of fell into my lap. And so I
Okay.
met this group at a trade show and, met them and felt like they were the right partner. And as I was talking through what their capabilities were and they were matter of factly selling to me what they could do, it became very clear that this wasn't just this outside sales force, but rather they were really going to provide a lot of strategy along the way, and that this was the next step that I needed in the evolution of the business.
Okay. Yeah. Um, again, you have luck isn't the word. It's like people are put in front of you in a really amazing way.
There's a lot of meant to be moments, I would say, but
Yeah,
it's meant to be moments and then knowing what to do with it, right? So it's seizing the opportunities and seeing the path that's clear ahead.
100%. And I think that's one of the great things about you as a leader is you really do have a vision and you are so innovative. Um, I want to talk a little bit about retail, and within that omni-channel sales, because we're getting a question in the chat from Brittany Lowe, and it is in terms of sales, do you recommend trying to get your product into as many small boutiques or shops as possible? Um, is that or is that a distraction? And should I focus more on D2C, Amazon, in those early days?
So I would say, certainly for us it was different because Amazon D2C wasn't what it was. And I think that it's really a decision of what is your strategy. So you can start um, as a D2C brand, Amazon, or going through smaller retailers and more regionally. And so for me, even though we started as D2C, quote unquote, the strategy was really getting into regional retailers. And I think today, it shifted so much in food, but showing that you can succeed in retail, I think is really truly the most important thing versus D2C. Um, but being able to focus your retailer concentration in a singular region, you're owning your home base, so they say, is what is really critical. For me, I was in New York at the time, and so we focused on getting into those independent stores in New York City. And that way, it's one thing just to get the product on the shelf, but it's a totally different thing to get the product off the shelf. And so how do you concentrate your marketing efforts on doing that is critical. And so it was um, a real initiative for us of focusing on New York and then opening up to the Northeast. And then it was
Mm,
the whole East Coast. And then we moved to the West, and at that point then went national. So having that geography, I think, is really key.
Amazing. You really went region by region. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, that opens us up into retail. And we have 15 minutes left together and so many more questions to get to. But this is another audience question from Varsha, and that is for founders hoping to land Whole Foods or Sprouts one day. What does realistic growth look like before a national buyer will take you seriously?
So, for us, we had gotten into Whole Foods as a local brand. We were also a local loan recipient, but we got in as a local brand. So we got into one region, and then we had gone into about 4 regions. And while in those 4 regions, we were showing success, meaning, our turns were better than competitors. And at that point, Whole Foods came to us and said, "We want to push you out nationally because you're doing so well in all of these regions." And so it was really showing that, again, that regional success before pushing out nationally, that at the time was so critical to how they worked. I think today it is a little bit different than it was then from a regional perspective, but I think being able to tell any sort of success story, whether it's 1 store, 10 stores, what have you, that just continues to build credibility as you go out to sell. And that's true even today, for us to have, as we're launching a new item, even if we can show one success story and, okay, this is working in Whole Foods, then we take that story to Target, then we take that story to Costco, and that just continues to unfold. And oftentimes it is sometimes a strategy with a new item launch, rather than saying we're going to go national with it. We say, let's start this within a retailer, or let's start this within a channel before pushing this fully out.
And if we're looking at it from a small budget perspective, um, what marketing tactics or strategies do you feel like drive the most velocity? Let's say we're again for a smaller budget founder. What would you focus
I
on?
I mean, to me, and again, the times were different when I started, but to me, it was always like getting the product. I felt so strongly that our product was so different,
Mm,
and that getting the product into people's mouths was most important. And so for me at the time, it was, demoing in stores and going to any sort of consumer event where people could try it. Now, today, I think you can do a combination of how to use social media and people to express how delicious something is and speak to that without also having to be in front of someone. So I think a combination of those two, is certainly a vehicle that can be low cost. It's, sending product out. You don't have to ask them to pay an influencer or micro influencer, whomever, to post about it, but if they think it's delicious, they're going to talk about it. And so that's certainly a low cost way to be able to get product in people's mouths and have people talking about how delicious this is and make it focused on who you're sending the product to.
yes, gifting, demoing, sampling. I think those are all really great low cost options. Okay, so what do early stage brands underestimate about selling into retailers like Whole Foods or Target? What are some things that maybe you were not prepared for, um, when you went into retail that you underestimated?
I think one is probably what said a little bit ago, of like, it's one thing to get on the shelf, but another thing to get off the shelf. You work so hard, you get so excited to say, like, we need to get into X, Y, and Z retailer. And then it's also realizing, wait, now we need to figure out how this is actually going to work. Like, just because it's on the store shelf does not mean it's going to sell. I think that's one thing to certainly, think about. The second one is the cost. And so actually, when I first hired that outside sales team, the guy said to me, "I will get you into Whole Foods nationally, but, like, it's gonna cost $1,000,000." And not, from him, it was just the cost, the fees, the promotional support. And so I think really underestimating what it takes from a cost perspective to support it, whether that be through the retailer, through the distributor, or from a marketing perspective. And that's why it's so critical to be focused on the retailers that you launch in, because if you go so widespread, it's going to cost so much money and cost a lot in resourcing.
I have heard that from so many F&B founders is the cost was the biggest thing they underestimated. You know, being involved in different promotions and things like that really almost made them reconsider if certain retailers were right for them because they're like, we're profitable, but then when you put that up against the cost associated to some of the things that they want us to be included in, it's like
Yeah.
almost zeroes out in some cases. So um, that's a really great point.
And
And
that's where I think being really mindful of the decision if you're going to be scrappy is to say, like, if I want to go national right away and get into all these stores, that is going to require you to raise money earlier versus if you take an approach of we're going to get into this region and then the next region, etc. It's just a slower, more mindful approach that might not require as much capital.
right, and there are, you can look outside of uh, institutional capital. You can look at angels and
Sure.
uh, friends and family and grants and loans and debt financing and all of those sort of things. But at the end of the day, it takes capital. Um, this question is from Monica Kim, and that's what were the biggest operational hurdles in scaling to national retail?
I would say the biggest operational hurdles were probably just over the years finding great manufacturing partners. I think it is really hard. Um, I always joke that like God, I would love to open up a manufacturing facility. I don't really want to do that, but it is hard to find a great partner, and we definitely struggled many years in the beginning to find a partner who could make a great product day in day out. We have a product that is very artisanal. We bake granola 3 pounds on a pan with a lot of pans, so it's still think about like making that in your home just with a lot of oven. So
Uh,
I would say that the scaling up definitely has been on the manufacturing side in finding greatness, which is not easy.
yeah. Um, I'm now trying to prioritize our last couple of questions together. Something that you mentioned at the top was you were getting picked up by different outlets, things like Oprah's favorite things or her O list, which was a huge visibility moment for founders without PR budgets. What realistic earned media strategies have actually helped move the needle, or do you think can move the needle today?
I would say, um, you know, there's been so many different moments over the years that and PR has shifted so much. So it's like I think it's a little bit hard of a question because PR strategy has shifted. What was once like you could get this big moment in Oprah or Daily Candy, just it doesn't exist so much. And so I think like really social media is the best place to um be testing and learning and just and spending the time there seeing what can evolve because anything can happen. It's really opened up, I think, opportunity because you don't have to have a PR budget and um it's just like you don't know what's going to stick.
I'm curious your thoughts on this because Allison Ellsworth from Poppy has touched on this. We've talked about this inside of one of the communities inside of Female Founder Collective of people weighing when is the right time to bring on a PR team and when is the cost actually worth it? Because in a lot of times people haven't reached the growth or revenue that's actually makes that hire make sense. Do you have any thoughts on when the best time is to bring in PR, outside PR?
I mean, I brought on outside PR almost day one after seeing what happened with Daily Candy. So they weren't internal, they were outside. Um, but as I saw what happened with Daily Candy, it became very clear, like, wow, what else could happen? And so as PR has morphed, I think that, it morphs into so many different avenues, and PR can be so broad. But we've always had PR, and it's always been something that I think has been important to us as another vehicle of just that brand building. Like, to me, from the beginning, it was always so much more than just the product, but just how do we build the brand, even if it doesn't mean we have a return. Like, that brand building was critical. And so that's always been an always on tactic for us.
Right. I mean, and it's proven successful for you all. You all are basically the Kleenex of the breakfast aisle. Like when I think I'm going to get granola in my mind, I picture your
That's
packaging
so
and your
nice. Thank you.
yeah, I mean it's true. Okay, so another question that I'm getting from the chat from Teresa is can you speak to keeping a strong, clear vision while also adapting to the growing of the business? Thinking back to you explaining with your hero product changing and bringing on General Mills. So, how have you made sure as the company grows that you create a strong or you keep a strong vision and a clear brand?
I think for me, from the beginning, like, I was just so clear that I was taking my background in holistic nutrition, but and wanting to work with clients and help them on their wellness journey. And all of a sudden, this opportunity came in front of me, and I thought, like, wow, I now have an opportunity. Instead of working with 10 clients, I can hopefully help like thousands of people on their wellness journey, starting with food, but also in trying to build more of a lifestyle brand. So I really always had this North Star that has felt so personal to me that it's been, I don't want to say easy, but I think a little bit easier for me in having that real personal drive
Yeah,
and why that we've never faltered from that. And so as a team, you know, that's just been the North Star, and that has never changed. And so I think when you're really mission driven, it becomes a lot easier to answer all of those questions and say, like, does this work? Does this not work? When we know what our North Star is and not really changing from that.
yeah. Elizabeth, we have 1 minute left together, so I want to end on just two rapid fire questions. One is, what was the biggest mindset shift that helped you go from scrappy founder to confident CEO?
Oh, great
Confident,
question.
courageous.
Um, I think probably the mindset shift was knowing that I could step out of my comfort zone and do it. And that, like, if I didn't know anything about the industry, I knew nothing about CPG, but here I was starting this company. And I think just having that belief that anything was possible, um, really helped to give me the confidence that I could move forward.
Love that. Final question for you is, what is one thing you wish you knew when you were starting that would have saved you time or stress?
Probably having that lawyer in the beginning.
Yeah, I know everyone keeps saying in the chat, tell us the name of the lawyer,
Yeah.
which you can share verbally or I can share out afterward. But
His name
huge
is Chuck Cotter. He's at Morrison Forrester.
amazing. Okay,
And
so if you
I'll
stayed
have to
until
email him now to watch out.
you've got a flood of emails coming in. Sorry about that. So if you stayed until the end, you just got your granola treat for staying until the end. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. This has been amazing. Thank you to the founders and the attendees who RSVP'd and dropped questions. If you want the replay, if you did not technically RSVP for this event, if you go in and RSVP, we'll make sure that you get access to the replay and we'll send that to you out. Hopefully, well, it's Thursday by the beginning of next week. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. You're amazing.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for
Beautiful. See
listening,
everyone
everyone.
inside the 10th house. Bye, everybody.
Bye.